Love becomes paperwork when someone decides you don't deserve to stay. The house was a rental before it was theirs, before the second mortgage, before his mother's silver went into the dining room cabinet and her grandmother's quilt found the guest bed, before 23 years turned a Thursday in October into their Thursday, their October, the anniversary they almost forgot to celebrate because it felt less like a date and more like breathing. The kitchen tile cracked near the sink in year 7. They'd meant to fix it. They never did. She learned to step around it the way you learn to work around any small, permanent flaw. He kept his papers in the study, tax returns in manila folders, old pay stubs in accordion files, a metal cabinet with a lock he'd lost the key to years ago, so it stayed open, trustworthy in its permanence. She never thought to look through any of it. Why would she? They had a will. They'd signed it together at the attorney's office downtown, the one with the waiting room that smelled like lemon furniture polish and old carpet. That was enough. That was what married people did. This isn't fiction. This is how love disappears, one small truth at a time. The world, before Saturday mornings meant farmer's market if the weather held. He'd buy honey from the man with the handlebar mustache. She'd get sourdough from the woman who never smiled but always remembered their order. 2 loaves, one with rosemary. They'd drive home with the windows down even when it was too cold because he liked the way the air felt, clean and sharp, like something just beginning. Their daughter called every Sunday at 4, 31 now, living in Portland with a boyfriend they'd met twice. The calls lasted 12 minutes on average. She knew because she'd started noticing, not timing exactly, but aware of how quickly her daughter's voice moved from pleasantries to the reason she had to go. Dinner plans, laundry, the rhythm of a life that no longer needed theirs, except in measured doses. He worked late on Tuesdays. Board meetings, he said. The nonprofit he'd helped launch 15 years ago, something about veterans services and community outreach. She'd stopped asking for details after a while, not from lack of interest, but because he'd tell the same stories. The funding struggles, the director who couldn't manage budgets, the grant proposals that never quite landed. She'd nod and heat his dinner when he got home around 9, and they'd eat together in front of the news, his hand resting on her knee the way it had since they were young and didn't know yet how long they'd stay. There were small distances. Of course there were. He spent more time in the study. She spent more time in the garden, trying to keep the rosemary alive, even though the climate wasn't quite right for it. They talked about replacing the deck. They talked about visiting his sister in Colorado. They talked about a lot of things they never quite did. But talking was enough. Talking meant they were still together. Talking meant the shape of their life still held. One afternoon in late September, she brought iced tea to the study. He was hunched over the desk, reading something on the computer, his reading glasses sliding down his nose the way they always did. She set the glass on a coaster, one from the vineyard they'd visited on their 10th anniversary, and he looked up and smiled, a real smile, the kind that still reached his eyes. "Thanks, love." "You working?" "Just paperwork. Estate stuff." She kissed the top of his head. His hair smelled like the shampoo they both used, the generic brand from the grocery store, nothing special. "Don't work too late." "I won't." She didn't ask what kind of estate stuff. Why would she? The fracture October 15th, a Thursday. She remembered because it was the day the dishwasher broke mid-cycle, flooded the kitchen floor, and they'd spent the evening with towels and a mop bucket, laughing the way you laugh when something inconvenient becomes absurd. He called a repairman. She made grilled cheese for dinner because everything else felt like too much effort. They ate standing at the counter, and he told her about a colleague at work who'd gotten a puppy, a golden retriever that kept chewing through power cords. "We should get a dog," she said. "We should." They wouldn't. They both knew. But it was nice to pretend. After dinner, he went to the study. She watched a documentary about coral reefs, half paying attention, her mind wandering to whether they needed to replace the dishwasher or just repair it, and how much either option would cost. Around 10, she heard the study door close, his footsteps in the hallway, the sound of the bathroom sink running. She meant to go to bed, she almost did, but the study door was open, just a crack, and she'd left her reading glasses in there earlier, on the side table by the armchair where she sometimes sat when he worked late, keeping him company without interrupting. She pushed the door open. The desk lamp was still on. His computer was asleep, the screen black. Her glasses were where she'd left them, next to a stack of documents he'd been reviewing. The top document had a blue cover, formal, legal, the words Revocable Living Trust printed in serif font across the front. She picked it up without thinking, without permission. She didn't need permission. They were married. The first page was introductory language, legalese, whereas and hereby, and beneficiaries. She skimmed, her eyes catching on their names. His name, her name, their daughter's name. It looked right. It looked like the kind of document you'd expect. Then she turned to page 4. Section 7, Distribution upon Death of Grantor. She read it once, then again. The words didn't change. In the event of the grantor's death, all assets held within this trust shall transfer directly to the named beneficiaries, specifically Catherine Marie Hammond, daughter, the surviving. Spouse is expressly excluded from any claim or distribution from this trust. This provision is irrevocable and supersedes any prior agreements or understandings. Her hands didn't shake. Not at first. That came later. At first, she just stood there, the document in her hands, the desk lamp casting a circle of yellow light that didn't reach the corners of the room. The clock on the wall ticked. 10:47. She read the paragraph again, then the next section, then the one after that. Everything was in there. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio she knew existed but had never looked at closely because he managed it. Because he was good with numbers, and she wasn't, because that was how they'd divided their life, and it had seemed fair. Every asset had been moved into the trust. Every asset would go to their daughter. And at the bottom of page 12, in a section titled Surviving Spouse Provisions, there was a single sentence. The grantor's spouse shall retain no rights, claims, or interests in any property governed by this trust. Dated 6 months ago. Signed by him. Notarized. She set the document back on the desk exactly as she'd found it. She turned off the lamp. She walked out of the study and closed the door. In the bathroom, she brushed her teeth. She looked at her face in the mirror. 52 years old, laugh lines, gray hair she'd stopped coloring 2 years ago because it felt like too much effort, and he'd said he liked it. She looked the same as she had that morning, but the reflection didn't feel like hers anymore, the unraveling. She didn't say anything that night, or the next morning, when he made coffee and asked if she wanted eggs. She said no, she wasn't hungry, and he nodded and made toast for himself, standing at the counter reading something on his phone. Friday passed. Saturday. Sunday, their daughter called at 4. She listened to the conversation from the next room, his voice easy and warm, asking about Portland, about the boyfriend, about plans for Thanksgiving. Your mom's here. You want to say hi? She took the phone. Hi, sweetie. Hey, Mom, how are you? Good, we're good. Dad said the dishwasher broke? Yeah, but it's fixed now. Good. Listen, I've got to run, but I'll call next week, okay? Okay. The call ended. She handed the phone back to him. He set it on the counter and asked if she wanted to go for a walk. She said she had a headache. He went alone. She went back to the study on Monday. He'd gone to work. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards under her feet. The document was still there. She read it again. Every page, every clause, every provision that spelled out exactly how little she mattered in the architecture of his death. There was another document beneath it, a letter addressed to their daughter. She opened it. Katie, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I want you to know that everything I've done to protect what we built. Your mother is a good person, but she doesn't understand financial planning the way you do. This trust ensures that everything stays in the family, our family, the one that came before her. I know she'll be upset. She may not understand, but you will. I'm trusting you to handle this with grace. I love you. I'm proud of you. Take care of the house. Take care of yourself, Dad. She read it twice. 3 times. Our family, the one that came before her, 23 years, and she was still before, still outside, still not quite enough. She folded the letter, put it back, left everything exactly as it was. That night, she made spaghetti, his favorite. She didn't eat much. He asked if she was feeling okay. She said she was fine, just tired. You've seemed tired a lot lately. I'm fine. He reached across the table and touched her hand. If something's wrong, you can tell me. She looked at him, his face, the one she'd memorized so completely she could draw it in the dark. I'm fine, she said again. The confrontation, 3 weeks passed. October became November. The leaves turned, the air got colder. She kept waiting for him to tell her, to sit her down, to explain. He didn't. She found herself cataloging everything. The groceries she bought, the laundry she folded, the dinners she cooked, the appointments she scheduled, the calls she made. All the invisible labor that kept a house from falling apart. All the work that would stop mattering the moment he died. On a Wednesday evening, while he was in the study, she stood in the doorway. Can we talk? He looked up. Of course. What's on your mind? She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, sat in the armchair by the window. I saw the trust. The silence lasted 3 seconds. 4, 5. Okay, he said finally. Why? It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. He took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes, set them on the desk. It's about protecting the assets. From who? Not from anyone, for Katie, so she doesn't have to deal with probate, so everything's clean. And I'm excluded. You're not excluded. You're... Page 4, Section 7. Surviving spouse expressly excluded. He was quiet. Why? She asked again. My mother set it up this way. Before she died, she wanted the family assets to stay in the bloodline. I've been family for 23 years. I know. Then why does the letter to Katie say our family, the one that came before her? His face changed, just slightly, a tightening around the mouth. You read the letter. I read everything. That was private. We're married. And that means you get to go through my things. Your things. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Our house, our life, our things, or so I thought. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark yard. I was going to tell you. When? When it mattered. When you were dead, you mean. When I'd already lost you, and then found out I'd lost everything else, too. You wouldn't lose everything. There's... What? The will? The one we signed together? Does that even matter anymore? The house is in the trust. The accounts are in the trust. But there's life insurance. There's... enough to rent somewhere? He turned. That's not fair. Fair? The word felt sharp in her mouth. You wrote your daughter a letter explaining why I don't deserve what we built together. And you're talking to me about fair? I didn't say you don't deserve. You said she's family. I'm before. That's not... He stopped, started again. My mother wanted it this way. Your mother's been dead for 8 years. And this is what she wanted, what she set up. And you agreed. Yes, the word hung between them. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd be upset. So you just decided I'd find out when? I thought... He stopped. I don't know what I thought. She stood, walked to the door, put her hand on the handle. Do you love me? Of course I do. Then how could you do this? I was protecting... Not me. She opened the door. Wait. But she didn't. The fallout. She stopped cooking his favorite meals. Started eating earlier. Smaller portions. She'd leave a plate for him in the refrigerator with plastic wrap over it, and he'd heat it himself when he got home. They still slept in the same bed. Neither suggested otherwise. But the space between them felt wider. She stayed on her side. He stayed on his. Thanksgiving came. Katie didn't visit. She called, apologized, said Portland was too far and flights were too expensive. They didn't push. After the call ended, he asked if she wanted to go out for dinner somewhere. She said no. They ate chicken and mashed potatoes in front of the TV. The news played. She didn't hear any of it. December arrived cold and early. He started sleeping in the guest room, said he was snoring, didn't want to keep her awake. She didn't argue. One evening, she took the quilt off the guest bed, her grandmother's quilt, the one she'd brought into the marriage. She folded it and put it in the hall closet. If the house wasn't hers, the quilt wouldn't live there, he noticed. Didn't say anything. put a different blanket on the bed. She called a lawyer, one she found online, in a town 20 minutes away where she wouldn't run into anyone they knew. The lawyer was younger than she expected. Kind eyes, patient voice. "You're still married?" "Yes." "And you didn't know about the trust?" "No." "Did you sign anything? Any documents transferring assets?" "No." "Then depending on the state, you may have some recourse. Spouses usually can't be disinherited completely without consent. But if the assets were put in the trust before the marriage, or if certain conditions were met, we've been married 23 years. Then you likely have a claim, but it would mean contesting the trust, going to court. It would take time, money, and it would destroy what's left." The lawyer nodded. "What do most people do?" "Some fight, some walk away, some stay and pretend everything's fine until it's not their problem anymore." "That's bleak." "I know." She didn't hire the lawyer. She thanked her for her time, drove home, sat in the car in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. The reckoning, he started remembering things differently. The way he'd always managed the finances, how he'd tell her not to worry, he had it handled. How she'd felt grateful, not realizing she was being kept out. The family gatherings where his mother would talk about lineage, about keeping things in the family, about blood, how she'd smile when she said it, how he'd nod, the way he'd never added her to certain accounts. Said it was simpler this way, cleaner. She'd believed him. The times his mother had bought gifts for Katie but never for her. "You understand," he'd said. "It's a grandmother thing." She understood now. She wasn't family, she was a guest. A long-term guest who'd overstayed without realizing the lease was never permanent. One night in January, she found him crying in the study, sitting at the desk, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. She stood in the doorway, watched. He looked up, his face was wet. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For this, for everything." "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. That you forgive me, that we can fix this." "Can we?" "I don't know." She walked to the desk, looked down at him. This man she'd loved. This man who'd built a wall of paperwork to keep her out. "Did you ever think about how this would make me feel?" "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "My mother—" "Your mother isn't here, you are. And you made a choice." He nodded. "I can't change it," he said quietly. "The trust is irrevocable." "I know." "So what do we do?" She didn't answer. She left the study, went to the kitchen, made tea, stood at the counter watching the steam rise from the mug. He came in 10 minutes later. "I'll set up a separate account, just for you, with enough that you'll be okay, that you'll have something." "Something?" "More than something. Everything I can give you outside the trust." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" She looked at him. Really looked. "You should have chosen me." "I did. I married you." "But when it mattered, you chose her, your mother, Katie, the blood, everyone but me." "That's not." "It is, and you know it is." He stood there, silent, defeated. "I'm sorry," he said again. She nodded. "I know, but sorry wasn't the same as changed, and knowing wasn't the same as healed. The legacy." They stayed married. It seemed easier than the alternative. Easier than lawyers, division of property, explanations to friends and family. Easier to keep living in the same house, sleeping in separate rooms, passing each other in hallways like roommates who'd signed a lease they couldn't break. Katie visited once in the spring, stayed for a weekend, asked if everything was okay. They both said yes. Fine, just busy, just tired. She didn't ask again. She started taking long walks in the evenings, hours sometimes, through the neighborhood they'd moved to because it was affordable, because it was near his work, because it had good schools, even though Katie was already grown by then. She'd walk past houses with lights on, families eating dinner, lives unfolding the way lives are supposed to. Sometimes she'd stop and look at their house from the street, the porch light on, the living room glowing. From the outside, it looked warm, whole, like the kind of place where people loved each other. She wondered if anyone looking at it could tell the difference. One evening in late summer, she came home from a walk and found him in the kitchen making dinner. Pasta, garlic bread, a salad. "I thought we could eat together," he said. She set her keys in the bowl by the door, the same bowl they'd had for 15 years, the ceramic one with the blue glaze. "Okay." They sat at the table, ate in silence for a while. The food was good. He'd always been a decent cook. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Every day?" "Why don't you?" "Because I gave 23 years to this, and I don't know who I'd be without them." He nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" "I think so." They finished eating. She helped him with the dishes. They worked side by side the way they had 1,000 times before, his hands in the soapy water, hers drying and putting away. When they were done, he turned to her. "For what it's worth, I do love you." She looked at him, saw the man she'd married, the man who'd betrayed her, the same person, somehow both. "I know," she said. And she did. That was the worst part. She believed him. Love wasn't the problem. Love had never been the problem. Trust was. They kept living. That's what people do. They keep living even after the shape of love has changed, even after the promises turn out to mean less than the paperwork. The house stayed in the trust. The accounts stayed in the trust. She opened a separate savings account in her name only. Put money away when she could. Not much, but something. A life raft, maybe. Or just proof that she existed outside of him. She stopped thinking about the future. It hurt less that way. Stopped imagining what would happen when he died. Stopped wondering if Katie would let her stay in the house for a while. Stopped planning. Just lived. Day by day. Morning coffee, evening walks. The crack in the kitchen tile still there, still unrepaired. Some nights, lying in her separate bed, she'd think about forgiveness. Whether she could, whether she should, whether it even mattered. She'd never stopped loving him. That was the cruelest joke. Love didn't disappear just because trust did. It stayed. Stubborn, painful, impossible to kill. She wondered if that was enough. Most days she didn't know. On their 25th anniversary, he bought her flowers, roses, her favorite. Left them on the kitchen counter with a card that said, simply, "I'm sorry." She put them in a vase, set them on the table. They were beautiful. They lasted a week. When they died, she threw them away and didn't replace them.